we have a great guest. We have Morgan Chaney here. Before I dive into Morgan and do a proper intro, what I want to do is talk a little bit about employee recognition and the difference between benefits and perks. A lot of times there's always a misconception on what is perks versus what is just true benefits. And I'm of the notion that when you start giving perks to people too often, you start gifting them on a regular basis, it almost becomes a dependency. It's something that they come to expect it rather than work to earn it on a regular basis. And so it's been confusing for me as a leader myself as to when is it appropriate to truly do the gift of, restaurant gift cards, send somebody on a trip, or because I don't want them to become like, well, I didn't get it this year and I depended on it. So where's the difference is? So that's kind of one of my personal things. So I'm super excited to have Morgan come in. They're with a company called Blue Board. This is what they do. They really help specialize in employee recognition, how to really get rewards into the company, really so that people feel comfortable there. So Morgan, great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So I'm dialing in live from San Francisco at Blue Board's office. Hello, welcome to Blue Board. We're based in San Francisco in Soma, so having some lovely weather today. So I'm here in SF. I've been with Blue Board actually for 2 years as our head of marketing, but do spend a lot of time with our company culture. We're a growing team, so everybody gets to really shape that and think through how we want to recognize our own employees as well as those that we're servicing. And a little bit about Blue Board, we do experiential rewards and recognition. So the idea is that instead of sending someone cash or gift cards that might feel nice in the moment, we get to send people on really memorable, life-changing experiences, whether it's picking up guitar lessons again, taking the family on a vacation, going skydiving for the first time. There's really something for everyone, and we bring it to life through a really special concierge service.
Oh, that's awesome. Skydiving. Do people take that up a lot?
They do actually. I got to do it myself when I was 2 weeks in on the job. I get to go skydiving via our James Bond experience, which is a whole day of literally getting fitted for a suit, driving an exotic car out to the skydiving place, skydiving in the suit, and then learning how to mix the perfect martini. So I got to do the fancy car and the skydiving part of that, which was a really great welcome to the company.
That is so great, because I think company culture is really all about that kind of initial week to 2 weeks. I've seen different kind of conflicting reports, but some say if you don't really make that employee feel like it's a memorable experience in the first 30 days, your probability of losing them to a competitor, it just goes up dramatically. Have you seen anything like that? Is that an important thing in your software? You've noticed companies that a new employee, they want to get them engaged a little bit quicker?
Yeah, onboarding is huge. Like you mentioned, a lot of people, even within the first week, will know if they'll stay at that company for longer than 6 months. So, and onboarding really begins before they start with you. It's as soon as they accept that offer, really thinking of ways to get them excited about the company, maybe cover off on some of the more boring paperwork and logistics, introduce them to stories, maybe even have them meet someone from the company before they start, even if it's just for coffee. Some of the cool ways we've seen customers use Blue Board for onboarding is they might actually give a reward to the employee before they start so that they have that time between jobs to really do something special for themselves. So it's a reward entering in, and then once they arrive, there's a lot of great water cooler bonding that happens as people talk about the experience that they went on and what they chose. So it's a great way for them to bond with their coworkers when they arrive, and a really nice way to utilize that downtime before they start a new job.
I think that's important in any relationship, right? You gotta formalize that relationship. You gotta build it. And what better way to do that than through activities and events to really get them something to talk about and start a foundation together of memories and experiences. Often the training room just isn't the right spot to do that, right?
Right, exactly. And it can be small things too. We have a good practice of like sending people a book that they might want to read before they start, just to learn a little bit more about the industry, or maybe if they're in a sales role, it might be kind of some wisdom from one of the great thought leaders out there, maybe some swag even. So whether it's experiential or not, it's definitely important to start that relationship before the employee begins with the company, and to give them a really effective onboarding plan when they begin, with key goals they want to achieve even in the first week, introductions they can make, besides just the regular things of like getting their benefits set up and all of that stuff.
Yeah. I like that, thinking outside the box just a little bit on, it's more than just show up day one and they kind of guess where they need to go. I'm not really sure. Who do I check in with?
Yeah.
Really over the top on that experience level, right? I see a lot of recruiters talking about their priorities for 2018 is they need to change the candidate experience.
Yes.
How do we enhance the candidate experience? And a lot of times, these conversations I'm having with HR folks, it's just changing the job description. But from what I'm hearing from you, it's the experience is so much more than just a better job description and a better interview process. It's all the way through making them feel appreciated. That's probably the key word of millennials, is that yearning to be appreciated in the workplace, making them feel appreciated before day one even begins. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a tough world out there. We're close to the talent market here in San Francisco, where it's gotten just bananas, crazy competitive, especially for marketing talent, for engineering talent, sales talent. So it's really important to make that employee feel good about the choice they made before they begin with you, and to make sure that they're able to be set up for success, to hit the ground running as soon as they walk in the door, and feel like there's some things they can achieve and feel good about, even amidst all the information that they're taking in. For example, it might even just be on the marketing side, publishing your first post to social media or writing your first blog post in that first week. So even those small things can make a lot and make you feel like you've done something well, while you're taking in all the knowledge from the company.
I love it. So tell me a little bit more about kind of when I started the program, we talked a lot about that feeling of perks versus like entitlement.
Yes.
Right? And that recognition. Tell us a little bit more about, obviously your software helps companies with understanding that employment recognition process and making it super convenient. But let's talk through the psychological factors. How do you convey and make it so they come on, great onboarding experience, they're now part of the company, and you want to give them some level of recognition? Is there the right way to frame up that recognition so it doesn't come across as entitled, that I can expect this every 90 days as opposed to, wow, this is a great one-time accomplishment?
Yeah, and I loved that you brought that up, because it is often that people do confuse perks with recognition. We actually wrote a whole article about that on our blog, so I'm happy to share that. We can send that in the notes afterwards to the employer, to everyone who's attending. Really, if you take a step back from it, a perk is something that's available for everyone at the company. It might be that you have catered lunches, it might be that you have a really nice espresso machine, or you have remote work Fridays, whatever that might be. But it's absolutely something for everyone, and it doesn't signify any individual's contribution to the company. Whether you're the best performer or the worst performer, everybody will have those same perks. So it isn't a tool for driving behavior change. We find that recognition is, because it's individual or maybe in a team setting, but it's tied to a goal, an achievement, or maybe a milestone that individual employee achieved based on, goals that were set in front of them, or maybe that the company as a whole is working towards. So it's really much different than perks, in that it does identify behavior change and then demonstrate for the entire company what it means to do well, so that you can continue to motivate everyone else in the company to achieve like the other person did who was the reward recipient.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so let's frame this out just a little bit. So I come from a heavy sales background.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing I've learned, is the brain of a good salesman, saleswoman, sales team always knows where they stand. They always know what the goal is. They know what the gap is to accomplish the goal, and they know what the incentive is once they hit the goal. That's something that you're saying that you need to do, is you're creating the right framework ahead of time, or is it best to be spontaneous recognition after the fact?
Yeah, I think recognition can still feel spontaneous, but it's really helpful when there is transparency about what is the goal or what's the expectation for someone to do to receive the reward. So in the case of a sales bonus, we do a lot of sales contests. So it's usually really clearly outlined of, the person who delivers this much in revenue this quarter is going to be eligible for this contest, or the person who closes X number of new deals, or on this 1 year anniversary, this is the reward you get versus a 3 year anniversary. So we do feel it's important to be transparent, but it is really nice for managers to have the authority to say, along the way, maybe you did something, or in the case of sales, when it's very performance driven, it is usually outlined and there's that demonstration at the end, whether or not they achieved it. The ones that can feel more spontaneous, we have a lot of customers who do like company value based rewards. So those might be a little bit, less on a strict schedule as a sales one might be. It might be that someone recognizes an employee for demonstrating a company value and the manager then can reward them on the spot. So again, there's transparency around, there might be a program for company values, but when the employee receives it might be that more spontaneous opportunity, which is fun for the manager and fun for the employee to know that they have done something really well and either a peer or maybe the manager nominated them to receive this reward.
And I think the key word you said at the beginning was transparency.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't come across as favoritism, which I know the people that don't get it that's probably the easiest, that's the lazy accusation to make is favoritism, right? So I think you're right. Transparency and full disclosure before it begins, or even day one on the onboarding, we openly recognize and reward folks that can demonstrate core values inside our organization.
Mm-hmm.
We're so committed to those core values. Here's some examples of recognition we've done in the past. We hope to be able to recognize you in the future. I think that sets a really clear, transparent expectation of how important core values are to have that baseline.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see a big mix. The really formal programs where it's like anniversaries, 1, 3, and 5 years, get this reward, or maybe employee referrals. If you refer someone at this seniority, this is the reward you get. Those are great. Those are really formal, but it is nice to have a balance of the spot recognition where it is based maybe on values or based on really going above and beyond in your role and letting those managers have the authority to reward in the moment with the employee.
So who's doing this well? I mean, you don't have to name your favorite client that uses just your software, but I'm sure you see case studies, you hear examples of some really cool stories out there. I love the James Bond experience one.
Yeah, the James Bond experience is special.
Who's doing it really well?
Yeah, I'll talk to two, and they actually are both on our website. So if anyone does want more information, just blueboard.com/use cases, or you can go to the use cases section. One client in particular is Guidewire. They're a big engineering team also. We were talking about that earlier down here in the Bay Area. They did a really awesome employee referrals contest with us. The idea was, how do we really grow our employee referral volume? And that's probably a topic for a whole nother show, but really we find that employee referrals are so incredibly valuable. They're much easier to bring into the company. They're less expensive to acquire, and they typically stay with the company much longer because they have that built-in friend at work or that built-in person that brought them in. So the more the merrier on employee referrals. They were fighting some really aggressive headcount goals, wanting to boost their employee referral volume, and did a pretty great contest with Blueboard where based on the employees who referred the highest amount in a month, they would receive a Blueboard award. And then at the end of a 5-month period, there was a grand prize winner who received one of our Tiburon awards, which is definitely a much bigger, exciting reward. But the first month, one of the employees actually did go skydiving for the first time. He lived in Dublin, and with all of our skydiving packages, you get to have a video and all the assets that go home with you. So we made a video for them. It went viral through the company and really just helped boost awareness, buzz. People would walk by conference rooms and the video would be playing of Giuliano going skydiving. So it was really taking that opportunity to make a program very exciting through experiences and seeing their employee referral just go through the charts, which was awesome. So that's one of my favorites to talk about. We also have a client called Glaukos. They're a biotech company down in LA area, Southern California. they've done an amazing job of really celebrating the stories that come from recognition. So regardless of which tool you use, obviously we want everyone to reward the experiences, but anytime you have a story that comes from the reward moment, the recognition moment that's happened with the employee, really creating a destination to share those. They've actually created a dedicated Instagram page that has all the photos from employees going out and about, whether with Blueboard or just on their own exciting life adventures. Employees can share photos back to the HR administrator, and that lives in @FlatTomAdventures on Instagram. If you guys are familiar with the Flat Stanley adventures from back in the day, it was a cutout of Flat Stanley who you would take with you on all of your travels. So it was a way to kind of record and share through the early days of the internet what people were doing. So they took their CEO, whose name is Tom, and made him into Flat Tom, which was a really fun way to make the CEO. And he's an amazing leader. Everybody loves Tom, so it worked really well for them specifically. But as a way to bring him along with them as they're doing really amazing adventures in their own life, especially the ones through Blueboard, because they get Blueboard awards on their anniversaries. So the whole company has access to Blueboard, bringing them together, creating a destination to celebrate everyone's achievements and to bring to life the awesome experiences they've chosen. So you can read more about both of those customers on our website, but we're really proud of, again, how they're really evangelizing recognition and baking it into their culture.
So I think in both those examples, the clear thing is don't just give that reward, but utilize that reward. So they're utilizing content from the experience they're paying for to then become a marketing asset for recruitment marketing, for employee morale marketing, right? Is that a big thing that you see regularly, that they don't just give movie tickets? Take a picture of somebody with holding the movie tickets and leverage that as part of your boosting morale and marketing internally. Is that something you guys recommend that they do?
Yeah, it's a big push and a big focus for us right now at Blueboard, is this notion of recognition stories, and the fact that recognition doesn't have to end with the activity. There's this whole element of afterglow and continued awareness that builds once an employee goes on any type of recognition event and can share that back with the company. Like I mentioned before, it's the ability to make recognition more approachable. So if someone has a photo that they're celebrating, it's a lot easier to talk about than maybe how you spent your $500 in cash. So there's that element. It is a really great way to boost morale, like you said, and to show that recognition is actually happening. It's the proof that people are doing great things at the company, and that the leadership has really delivered on the promise of recognition. Because the sad reality is most employees, even if they have a recognition program in place, don't really know it exists, maybe because it's not centralized or it's not really talked about often. So people might get rewarded behind the scenes. So it should be a culture of recognition, and the stories, whatever the tool is of rewarding, helps that come to life.
Yeah. So I recently read a case study that talks about healthcare professionals and how, I want to say it was, I'll have to find it and add it to the show notes here, but it's something to the effect of 63% of healthcare professionals, they would actually quit their job and go work in an organization with better company culture, even if it meant them having less compensation. So I would assume that this recognition is not just about how big or glamorous the prize is, but it's about just the act of recognition that really gets to their heart. So for a lot of my clients here and folks that might not have big organizations and big grandiose budgets to send folks skydiving, that was so awesome. What do they do? Do you have some tips or some advice with people with limited budgets on what they should be doing?
Yeah, for sure. And just on Blueboard side, we do have rewards that start at $150, and those are typically for the employee and a +1. So there's lots of stuff that's still kayaking trips. It's doing a glass blowing class. It's learning flying trapeze. So all of those things exist at the $150 level. But we want everyone to have a culture of recognition, whether or not they work with Blueboard. And it begins in a minute with verbal recognition. So having the opportunity and creating the culture for managers to approach their employees in real time, even if it's just a quick message or a quick comment on something that they did, to again really highlight the event itself that was deserving of recognition. So you go to a sales meeting, the AE who's maybe new does a great job taking that minute to say, hey, I really loved how you did X. That was really special. I was really proud to see you deliver, the message that way, or whatever it might be. Or maybe for an engineer, really great job on this last sprint. I loved specifically how you solved this problem that we were trying to address. So making sure that it's relevant, it's authentic, and it really highlights the action that they did to deserve it so that they can repeat that and so that others can see what they need to model as well. So yeah, verbal and free in a minute. There's other ways. There's a few other blogs on our site. Companies might do gratitude boards where it's a kind of creative space for employees to go to. You can share notes with your peers if someone did something nice for you. So that's a really cool exercise for companies to embody, maybe in a shared space where they can have some paper and art supplies people can post on a board, notes of appreciation, or other kind of smaller items along the way. But regardless, it should be authentic, like I mentioned, tied to your company culture and vibe, and be something that everybody feels is accessible and comfortable.
Oh, I like that a lot. So I think a lot of folks, working with smaller budgets for recruiting or branding or their own internal marketing, and when they go and they approach the CEO or the CFO for a bigger budget, maybe to add in employee recognition, the first question they always get is, how am I going to measure ROI? Yeah. Right?
Uh-huh.
I'm sure that's a really common challenge you guys have. Where did they go? How do you measure this? Is there a way to measure it? Or what's the right way for them to approach this? If we have some folks right now watching this video and they say, I love this. Let's get after it. Whether we use Blueboard, whether we use gift cards, whatever it is we're going to do, we're going to create a culture of recognition. To your point, is we're going to celebrate and market recognition. How do we show an ROI? How do we show that it actually makes a difference?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. There's a great stat out there that says that only 1 in 10 companies are currently measuring their recognition efforts. So if you're not doing it now, not to worry, you're in good company, even if it's not the best company to be in. So we want to obviously move the needle on that. There's 2 main things that we really look towards when we're defining goals with our customers. The first is, hopefully, if they're not already, they'll start doing some macro engagement surveys through the company. So whether it's in-house through something like Google Forms, through a partner we work with, Culture Amp, for example, Office Vibe is a partner of Blueboard's, Tiny Pulse. Those are all paid opportunities to have engagement surveys. Or like I said, you can run them in-house with Google Forms, but starting to get a benchmark on how employees are feeling. And it's typically going to be broken out by different categories. Maybe it's, how do you feel about leadership and communication? How do you feel about learning and development opportunities, career pathing? How do you feel about the culture? And then how do you feel about recognition? So there is an ebook link that I can share after that I mentioned that is a whole guide on calculating your recognition ROI. And we include actually some of the questions that are great to ask specific to recognition sentiment. So at a high level, starting to get that base of recognition sentiment across the company through your engagement surveys. And once you launch a program, seeing if that moves the needle at all, even if it's improvements of 1 or 2 percentage points every 6 months, that's still progress. The second piece is our in-house offering at Blueboard. So we do a post-experience engagement survey. That means that every time someone completes the reward, whether it was a smaller reward like doing flying trapeze lessons with their family, all the way to going to the Galapagos on a photo safari, every employee has the opportunity to answer questions about not only how they enjoyed working with Blueboard and our concierge team, but we ask a handful of questions specific to engagement. So that might be, did the reward make you feel more motivated, more appreciated? Is this a good tool for retaining top talent? So all of that data is aggregated on our end and shared with our customers monthly so that they can not only hopefully have these 2 sources, macro engagement data that points to recognition, but also the rewards itself through Blueboard's data, and having that in their arsenal as they're, talking to leadership and showing the value of the program.
I love it. And something that came to mind while you were talking was we talked a little bit about referral marketing, like how to get more employee referrals. I think that's a great initial way that if we really are using the rewards and recognition to stimulate referrals for employment, we can start measuring that against our true cost per acquisition of employees. And that right there could be a great ROI to say, hey, our average cost per acquisition for an entry-level customer service role is $1,200 all in. But with this program, we got, 1,500 referrals, or excuse me, 15 referrals. And we spent $100 each in gift cards, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Boy, you could see pretty quickly how that could balance out and show a really strong ROI.
Yeah, to your point, when I think of ROI, it's kind of like, what are your goals? And then ROI from a dollar value, that is a great example, especially because we know how much it would cost to source someone outside of a referral, maybe through a hiring agency. So that specific example of getting the ROI from recognition tied to an employee referral program or to just any hiring programs is specifically outlined in the ebook I mentioned. So we can share that again in the notes.
That's awesome. So I think at this point, ROI could be a number of things. It could be a number of the performance indicators, the sentiment value. We can measure against sentiment. We can measure against just our true cost of doing business. And then the important thing in this whole dialogue is creating a baseline. So be consistent to measure against it. So have some sort of numerical value that you're recording against, whether it be through survey or just pure data on our cost per acquisition, and then measuring that every 90 days, every 6 months, every year, and looking at what the net difference is. And that becomes your ROI. That's really what your true savings is. And if you can go back and you can say, listen, our total budget of $20,000 this year for recruiting, for job postings and all this, we actually only had to spend 10 of that because we were able to give, $5,000 in bonuses for employee referrals. That's raw cash that's going to push right to the bottom line of the business. It's a true ROI on that dollar spent. So great feedback. Okay, so where do we start? If obviously these episodes, these shows are really meant to give people best practices. They're meant to really encourage them to be the best version of themselves and encourage other employees to be the best versions of themselves to build a company culture. Where does somebody start? What's the first thing somebody can do to say, I want to build a culture of recognition?
Yeah, I love that. So I would go back to kind of some of the data that they might have accessible. And if they're not doing surveys yet, which might point to some of those engagement drivers that you're going to want to help you prioritize your efforts, because recognition is always going to add value. But the reality is, if someone has a crazy leadership problem, address that and then bring in recognition as you can. But again, recognition is a low-hanging fruit, so hopefully they do both. But look at the setting of your environment and your workplace and start to make your priorities. Assuming that recognition falls into a priority, we love recommending that people maybe create a task force, so a representative group of employees that might have different tenures, different department roles, different seniority within the company from a management perspective. Ask them if they like what's working, especially if you have a program in place. If there's nothing, start to get their ideas, especially around rewards or the types of ways or programs that people would want to be rewarded. Do we want to do a company values-based program? Do you want to do something around performance or around employee referrals or whatever it might be? And if so, what type of rewards or incentives would be exciting to them? That'll really make sure that when you start to build that business case for your senior leadership, you have the voice of the people as well as maybe some data that shows more of a macro view of what the company needs right now. And then from there, working with Blueboard is really easy. If you're interested in experiences, which we hope you are, you'll visit the website. You can request information or request a demo there and start to chat with our team. But one of the great benefits is that we are very consultative in how we do work with companies. We share best practices. We have a really immersive onboarding experience with our customer success team to make sure that the launch and the education and the socialization is thought out so that when the program does launch, it's very sticky and adopted and will set everybody up for success.
Oh, that's great. Well, listen, Morgan, you've been a pleasure, a wealth of information. I want to end with a couple of Spitfire questions, just some quick questions, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Morning here. This is coming at you. All right. So, favorite music artist or album station?
Yeah, I go back and forth. So I feel like I do a lot of kind of alternative rock, kind of like more chill rock. So
Like
last
newer
concert,
stuff or older stuff?
a mix actually. The last concert I went to was the Ava Brothers. They're one of our favorites. They're kind of more in that like rock indie folk vibe, but they're amazing live. So that was the last concert I went to. But we do a lot of DJing at the office. It might be electronic, it might be jazz. One of our co-founders is a big musician. He played drums and piano and still does at the office. So it'll be a funny environment. We might walk into some loud EDM or you might walk into some like, cocktail jazz. It totally depends on the mood.
Oh, it's great.
But yeah, we listen to a lot here. So
Awesome. Favorite book?
Favorite book. Oh my gosh. I'm finishing right now yoga certification. So I've been reading a lot of yoga materials right now.
All right.
There's a really great book that I'm in the middle of right now called Start Where You Are. And it's more on the personal development side, but really kind of setting priorities for yourself and launching into the world based on that. So, but that's what I'm currently reading right now.
Awesome.
But yeah, old classics. I love The Great Gatsby. That's one of my favorites from just growing up. And there's some other really good ones. Jacob Morgan just put out a really good book around design thinking in the workplace for anyone on the HR side. So employee experience focused, which is great. He does a lot of interviews with like Airbnb's team and some other notable big businesses. So recommend checking that out, at least in the HR space with Jacob Morgan.
Cool. All right. And what if you could forecast, look into that glass ball and say, okay, for the next, let's say 2 to 5 years, what's the biggest disruption in HR the next 2 to 5 years? What do you think? When it has to come with company culture, the people side of business, what could disrupt it the most?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the shorter term goal is really just this movement around people first, personalization at scale. I would say the crazier long-term ones, I can't wait to see how remote working changes when we have things like self-driving cars and the need to not be so focused in a city specifically. So that's the crazier one. We're actually working with a company in that space right now, which is really exciting. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of the forefront on it. But yeah, I think the remote workplace is going to change really drastically as we have more opportunities like this over video chat, and that technology continues to improve, and the need to, or the ability to spread out because transportation is more accessible and easy, and a car might become a conference room in the future when you don't have to be driving it. So yeah, that will be really interesting to see as well. But like I said, on the forefront, this personalization at scale and helping people to bring culture, people first mentality back into the workplace, I think will be a lot of what we talk about in 2018 and even 2019.
Oh gosh, you didn't even hesitate. You were like, boom, right on it. I love it.
I want to ask you the same question. What are your thoughts on disruptions coming up in HR?
You know, I keep looking at AI. Right now, there's a lot of really interesting things that are happening, but I think a lot of automation, intelligence gathering to do better predictability, better predictive analysis of people in the workplace. I like with it. You know, there's some of the companies that have been historically in the dating space. Predictive matchmaking are now coming in the employment space to look at personality traits and how it really feels with the dynamic of the culture and the goals of the organization against the management style. Most people quit their jobs because of their manager, not because of the company, not because of the role. It's because of the leadership. And I think AI could play a really interesting dynamic around that. They could really shape how companies look at management, understanding that true frontline managers make such a vital role to retention. I think
absolutely.
Predictive analysis of personalities to become a manager and promote people, I think that's going to shift quite a bit of thinking. But we will see who's right. We'll come back in a couple of years and we'll replay this for each other.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, Morgan, how can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out and learn a little bit more?
Yeah, you can always visit us at blueboard.com. My personal email is morgan@blueboard.com. And like I mentioned, I'll be sure to share out the link to the Calculate Your Recognition ROI ebook. It's one of our favorites. So that'll be a good one, I think, based on the conversation we had to share.
Awesome. And we'll add that to our notes. Just want to say thank you again to everybody who's watching. We love doing this show to really share some insight on how to make your organization that much stronger and better. Again, we're with Viva HR. It's all about recruitment marketing. How do you leverage your company culture in attracting the right people? We have a free account, always will, always have. Feel free if you haven't signed up, get a free account on vivahr.com, and we look forward to catching you guys next week with the next edition of the Culture Marketing Show. Again, thanks, Morgan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.